All right. There have been many conversations over the last couple of, days. And one of those issues that we'll be looking at then now is freedoms and rights protected, and asking yourself, so what does it mean? Is there a place whereby rights and freedoms have to be given up for security? Is there a place where rights and freedoms have to be given up to ensure that other things take place? Do my rights end when yours begin? Or do my rights end when another begins? And that forms a part of the conversation that we will be having this morning. But since we're here, CT, want to remind us about today's proverb?
I certainly do. And the proverb is still from the Republic of the Sudan.
Still?
Oh, digger of a pit of wickedness, widen your lying place in it.
If you dig it for somebody else,
just make sure there's space for yourself.
Just make sure there's space for yourself.
As that person goes in, make arrangements for yourself to follow.
It really isn't that difficult for you to be good, kind, take others into consideration. It actually probably is easier for you to be kind than it is for you to be mean or evil or nasty. Easier.
No.
No?
No. Okay. Yes. No.
I understand what you're saying.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, please.
Wonderful, isn't it?
Thank you. The issue of rights comes into discussion. The king and queen of the royal... what are they called?
Dutch Kingdom.
Thanks. The Royal Netherlands are in Kenya.
Yes.
And the King, Wilhelm, made an address yesterday, and he spoke about certain things, and I want to tell you what that is. Now, it is interesting that he came and had that conversation when a number of things have been going on in the country over the last few weeks. Okay? This is what he said. King Willem-Alexander of the Netherlands yesterday urged President William Ruto to ensure rights and freedoms of Kenyans are respected, challenging him to uphold human rights, good governance, and accountability. Indeed, he said more. The Dutch royal, who arrived in the country Monday evening alongside Queen Maxima, said he would give attention to discussing the issues during his 3-day state visit. The people of Kenya, like those of the Netherlands, want their rights as free citizens to be respected and their voices to be heard. King Willem-Alexander said at State House, Nairobi, moments after a 21-gun salute rang out in his honor. Earlier, he and Ruto witnessed the signing of Memoranda of Understanding in Trade, Agriculture and Tourism, as well as a letter of intent on water infrastructure development. Ruto too challenged the Dutch king against abandoning his role on the global stage, which includes support for peace initiatives and other pressing issues. At the time of fraying partnerships, I urge their majesties to maintain the Netherlands' commitment to the principles of global solidarity and subsidiarity. In particular, I implored their majesties to extend support to the 8th replenishment of the United Nations Global Fund as it seeks to mobilize resources to battle difficult health challenges. So they talked about a number of things, and they said that, they would be interested in hearing the role of young Kenyans in recent developments, what opportunities they see for a bright future of the country. But it seems as though this issue of rights is something that anybody who visits the country is talking about and saying, you know what, your rights are those that must be secured by any government of the day. Why is it so important that everybody speaks on them and has been speaking on them in the manner in which they have been? Or are we looking at a situation where don't come back to my country and tell me what to do?
Well, some of these Western countries actually have a right to speak about this very subject. They have more of a right than we know. Because if we look at their history and the relationship with countries that they colonized, if it is one thing they abrogated were the rights of the people whom they colonized. And they did it for a very long time. So one could argue this is a subject they understand intimately. And then over time, when they began to understand exactly what the rest of the world, and the world began with their own citizenry, thought about this, and changes started coming about, and things like independence started coming about, for you to be acceptable,
yes,
there was need for people to not just talk about this, but to be seen to talk about it and to put it into practice. Because when you had monarchies, and they had them in the world, what the monarchies did was what they wanted. They didn't have any consideration for anything called the human rights. Remember, up until the Second World War, Europe as we know it had been at war with each other and segments of it for close to 2 millennia. That's just how cantankerous and how they sorted out the issue. So what we see now was born over a very, very, very long period of time. Okay? Now, we can argue that we've only had 60 years of independence or thereabouts, 60 years, a little bit more above 60. But that notwithstanding, the very subject of human rights, as it is understood now globally, and the freedoms that are supposed to be enshrined in any constitution, so that it is actually spelled out in clear, bold letters, underlined in green and circled in red, so you can't miss it. It is a subject that makes you give the impression that you clearly understand human rights and you clearly want to further it. But then it takes us to the subject of migrations that we've had in Europe. We're not talking about migrations that began within their own borders. We're talking about migrations from other countries. People from other countries who form minorities coming into them. Before we receive a lecture from somebody about human rights, you want to understand how do they deal with human rights when it comes to people who originally were foreigners coming into their country, and how is it then do we understand the rise of nationalism, which is a complete antithesis to this idea of tolerance of other people coming into your country. So, it is good that we are reminded. It is a wonderful thing. It is good that former colonial masters have begun understanding this, and we've seen countries actually coming out and admitting they were wrong. Reparations, money is being paid. We've seen the Germans do it. We've seen
the Belgians almost do it.
Yeah, they just stopped. Yes, we've seen the British sort of like not quite, but they're also there. And we've seen the Netherlands also doing their bit in fire. We've seen all this. So, thank you for the visit. But surely, there's some corners of your house that also need cleaning. We will take what you've said clearly, because we have many corners that require cleaning. But just live by the example and let us see how you clean these corners that we haven't spoken of, and corners that perhaps a little light needs to be shone on so that they can be cleaned properly.
What rights do you think they speak of? Because it would appear to me that, you can come and give the advice, but it looks as, and we're looking at the royal visit right now as an example, but they're not the first. That just before, the most recent one was another royal visit was the king and queen. The king of Great Britain was here months ago. You had other visits from other countries, but it seems as though this is one thread that sews in through all the conversations or all the addresses from statesmen who are outside of Kenya who come and have that conversation. So what rights do they speak of? To ensure that your children are educated, those are rights that they have. To ensure that you feed your people, those are rights that they have. To ensure that you take care of your sick, or are they crossing over those borders whereby you ensure that the rights of your people are stood on so that they don't get disappeared, that they don't get killed extrajudicially, that they don't suffer at the hands of what is the opposite of press freedom, for example, that they're able to report on matters arising without the fear of being taken away or, God forbid, killed?
I mean, I'd look at it from an aspect that Kenya is part of the global community. And it's part of the global community in the sense that whatever happens here will end up outside there and everyone will be able to see it. Like let's go back to the June 25th, what happened in this country. And everybody across the world was talking about it, including the killings that happened in the country. So when they come, when, say, the Majesty comes and talks about these rights, they're touching on human rights violations that happen because we also live in a country where we have the justice system that ought to play its role rightfully so. And this is also coming just at the backdrop of what we see as infringement to the media that is happening. And he's talking about the people have to be heard, and it is their right to be heard.
Can you go to the Netherlands today as a Kenyan leader and tell them what to do?
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
Would you be listening
Whether they will listen to you is the question.
Well, when they talk to us, are we listening? Are we listening?
Yes,
and
yes.
If we are, what is it that removes the wax from our ears and not theirs, so that when they speak, we listen clearer?
I'm just wondering why the insistence on this particular human rights issue has come to play. Or is it because that there would be incidents that would be seen to show that the abrogation of human rights is actually taking place in Kenya and on a regular basis? That are people being disappeared so much so that the world is taking notice and say, hold on a minute, you're going against the rights? Are people turning up dead where people are saying, hold on a minute, you're going against their rights? Is the situation so dire that people have to come and remind you all the time that say, hey, because what did he say? Uphold free speech and other freedoms. So does that mean that you're at a place whereby free speech is not being upheld, and that other freedoms are actually not being upheld? That somebody have the right to report on something and say it as it is without you, finye just a little bit?
I think it's coming at a time when, remember, before the king actually made his way here, over 15,000 Kenyans told him not to come. And why was that? Because Kenyans felt as though the government of the day is infringing on their rights. Therefore, the king knew here, knowing exactly what Kenyans, the concerns that Kenyans have. And we will also not forget the fact that he has his representation here through the embassies and whatnot. And these people communicate what is happening in this country back home. So he comes here with the idea or information on what our situation is, and as a leader and part of the global community, having been asked by Kenyans not to show up, he would not have not talked about that. Yeah,
it's something that had to come up.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at what happens within the country. Do you think, and this is something I'm going to ask that, we look to also on our socials this morning, when we look at it, we often do the comparison, right? I come up from a different part of the continent, but then living in Kenya, and I'm going to ask the question, do you think that for the large part, that Kenyans' rights, human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of passing of information and all those things are upheld? Do you think? I'll speak from somebody coming from outside inside, and I think yes, to a large extent. They're actually doing pretty well. Because there are countries on this continent where you will open your mouth, and even before you've opened for goodness sake, you're bordering a country where a man takes a walk and he's arrested. Literally. And I think he's still in jail. He's been moved from a military case to a civilian case now, whereby he takes a walk and he's arrested. There are countries on this continent where you will breathe the name of the president and you will not see the light of day for months on end until somebody decides to present you in a court of law for them to ask.
That is if you're alive.
If you're still alive, to be presented before court. So by and large, I'm sitting here and I'm saying, and I'm telling you that human rights to a very far extent are actually protected in Kenya, and are actually seen to the point whereby, people don't have to worry too much, that you can have conversations like this and somebody's not going to nick you at the end of the day. To a large extent, they actually are protected. Now, does that mean that because that you shouldn't try to achieve or strive for, a better place?
No, not at all. Because whilst we appreciate the fact that we can have this conversation, that there's a feeling that human rights and freedom of speech is actually being supported, does not mean that there are no ills or other threats against that right. And why Kenyans are concerned, or even the international community is concerned, is because there are attempts in interfering with these rights. Because you speak today, dissent is seen, you are arrested, you are disappeared. And if the populace, if the world continues to be quiet, what we'll see is these threats will continue to be more, and that right that we enjoy today will start diminishing. So we can't afford to be quiet.
Who's the protector of these rights?
For a very long time, we'd say law enforcers, but no, the people are the protectors of this right.
The people themselves to say that, I protect my rights so that I keep speaking out? Or how do you ensure that nothing happens to you if you actually then are speaking out, or your, freedom of association according to the law? How do you ensure that you are protected under the rights? How do you do that?
The people have given the constitution power, which gives them the right to do all these things and enjoy all these rights. In an event where those who are supposed to help in protecting that law and upholding that very law fail to do that, then the people take the mantle and ensure that their rights are not curtailed. I don't know, City.
These freedoms and these rights, it has to be an ongoing discussion, and it has to be an aspirational subject, because there is no country on the planet that can say they've actually achieved it.
Yes.
Because there are times when the interest of the state is at complete loggerheads with the interest of the citizenry. And then with every country, there are always people who tend to be a little extreme. And the people who, by their very nature, are subversive. So you could argue that what is the government to do? How are they to handle these things? Now, if you look at the history of the Netherlands, the Netherlands doesn't feature as a big colonial power when we have this discussion. The French do, the British do, the Americans do,
Germans,
the Spaniards, the Portuguese. Netherlands, hardly, but they were. Now, I have to ask the question, beyond just the visit and beyond what we're saying, oh, human rights, human right here, and so forth.
Freedom of speech.
Blah, 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 blah,
Press
blah.
freedom.
One of the things that the Netherlands has actually been criticized for is the way they've handled immigrants at their borders and the ethnic profiling that has been spoken of. But these are criticism, okay?
Yeah.
And there's also been complained of the disproportionate force that they use when it comes to these individuals and the proposed policies aimed at restricting asylum applicants and services for migrants, okay? Now, is this area of migrants, but this is something that's happening in Europe.
Yeah.
Europe has acquired a thing for asylum seekers. And they forget, some of these asylum seekers are people who come from countries that they were colonial masters of at some point or the other. So if it's a problem, we could argue this is a problem they brought upon themselves. Okay? But I feel and I think that whenever we talk about rights, let's extend them beyond human rights and talk about something like environmental rights. Shell Company, Royal Dutch.
Oh, okay, we're going there.
Of course, I'm going there.
Okay.
We're talking about environment. Other countries are restricting and trying to restrict and create laws that limit the use of fossil fuels. It is written and spoken of that the Dutch government gives subsidies for the use of fossil fuels. So if you talk about rights and environmental rights, there is a discussion right there. Okay? That's why I said this issue of rights, it has to be a discussion and it has to be aspirational. Because even as you try to speak about this, there are other issues that fingers could be pointed at. It could be said, but what about this? But at the same time, before this upsurge of people leaving their countries for whatever reason, the Netherlands, one didn't hear a squeak or a problem coming out of there. People went there, stayed there, and they were considered an extremely tolerant people. Just like the Scandinavian countries were. Right now it's a different story. But for the longest time, now there are those who argued this was so because they didn't have enough people of color for them to now have a colored view of this particular situation. And now they do. And so the tolerance levels are being tested. How do they deal with people who are different from them? How do they deal with people who believe differently from them? That's why I said when you're talking about rights, it's something aspiration.
You'll get there eventually.
Yes, but it's a work in progress. So perhaps what we ought to discuss, how is this work in progress? Let's start with the countries that the Netherlands colonized. For those who do not know. Do you know how many countries they colonized?
Well, there were not that many if you're going to give a comparison between them and Great Britain, for example.
No, Great Britain take the cup.
Great Britain and followed by France.
They went at this thing ham and tongs. They were not joking about this. Okay, so tell me, which countries do you think they colonized?
Are we talking about Africa?
No, the world over.
Brazil, some parts.
South Africa.
That's very good. You're very good. Continue.
Namibia, some parts.
Ghana, Suriname, Dutch Guyana, Brazil.
Oh, you're reading?
Yes, it's important to read.
New Netherlands, USA. Hey, okay.
New Amsterdam.
New Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sri Lanka,
Malaysia.
Taiwan, India. Then we have other countries in the Caribbean as well. Aruba, Curacao, Boinai,
Okay.
Saint Martin, Sabah, Sint. Hey, yes.
And you see, when you do that search, you realize there were very many countries that they influenced. Okay, so let's go further. How many have they paid reparations to?
Je ne sais pas.
See, I'm asking Aseto to do the homework.
Silence.
We're waiting for you.
Continue talking.
All right, let me assist you. Suriname, okay? One of the things that reparations, why I bring in the subject, it is an acknowledgement when somebody acknowledges that something was done to that country and its people, something which didn't quite meet the master even of the times. And with history, they've realized they really need to set right certain things that were definitely very, very, very wrong. Okay? And the wrong that we speak of often meant that when it came to to understanding what they did and what they did to the human beings they found there. They couldn't stand clear in the cold glare of the light then, and even now when the light is even brighter, because we understand human rights more, there is need not just for an apology, but for you to try and make good. Okay? Now, the people who had a big say in Namibia were the Germans. Okay? They have apologized.
Yes, they did.
Yes.
And even paid money. But it has been said it's not enough. But they made an attempt. 1.3 billion euros, not too bad. But then it was over, God knows, 25 years, a long period of time. But the effort was made. But significantly, they said sorry in clear terms. Clear terms. They did not he and haw and said, no. So the issue of, if we admit it fully, there'll be legal consequences. Of course there'll be legal consequences. What do you think?
Yeah.
What am I saying? I am saying that a visit like this brings to the fore the need for discussions to be had, an honest conversation about some of these things and what it is that it means to have partnership. Because this particular visit, is said, it's to strengthen ties, okay? And to bilateral ties to improve trade, security, climate action, and youth empowerment. That's what this particular visit is touted as. So if you are to be granular and you ask, okay, let's look at trade. Let's look at security. Let's look at climate action. Let's look at youth empowerment. A country that is known for having reclaimed land from the sea is a country you take very seriously. Because not many people have been able to do this. Okay? So what can we learn from the Dutch? Okay? And if it is bilateral, then what can they learn from us?
From us, yeah.
Yeah, what is it? I'm asking the questions because for the visit to make sense, one must answer in detail these issues that it is said that they came to strengthen.
Yeah.
One of the things that Britain, Germany, have actually addressed directly, I'm giving this just as an example, is the issue of reparations, meaning they've admitted some wrong was done. The Netherlands have actually come up with monies for development, social initiatives, things, a fund of, say, some 200 million euros to help with initiatives related to slavery and so forth. But they have avoided a direct payment of what you call reparations, okay? Which in my view means they have avoided a direct admission that certain wrongs were done.
But that's exactly what you do when you give reparation, is that you're essentially saying that we were wrong at some point.
Yes, and they haven't directly come out. There have been many initiatives in Suriname and other countries that they colonize, but coming out directly. Now, why I want to say this before we move on to the next topic is we have a lot to learn from the mistakes they made and the payments that they're having to pay directly or indirectly for wrongs. Now, as a country, that's something we need to learn.
Absolutely.
Certain wrongs will have to be paid for at some point.
True.
And if you make them now, if you make those wrongs now, make them knowing that whether it is you who's going to be at the position of payment or somebody else, at the end of the day, those payments will be made.
Yes, and right now you can avoid some of those things.
Yes, you can.
So there's the option of avoiding them.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.